Hey everyone, welcome to today's masterclass, which is all about one of my favorite topics, perfectionism. I am a recovering perfectionist and I can't wait to tell you a little bit about what that means and how I did that. But if you are a perfectionist, if it is starting to stop you or prevent you from achieving certain things in your life, this is the place for you today. I'm going to go over 5 different strategies that you can use in order to help yourself still be an A+ without the perfectionism, without all of that additional stress that's preventing you from moving forward in your career and in your life. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alana Shaked. I'm a women's executive and lifestyle coach. And I help women create balanced, fulfilling careers and lives. So like I mentioned, by the way, if you're watching this live, just go ahead and say hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you're watching this on replay, just go ahead and drop a hashtag replay in the comments. And that way I know that you are here. Okay, so a little bit about my background and my perfectionism. So I actually started out my career as an attorney at a big firm. I was a litigator at a Fortune 500 firm, and as part of my job, I was required to be a perfectionist. Okay, so one of the things that lawyers do is that they're extremely detail oriented, and they ensure that there are no mistakes in any kind of documents, right? So this was something that was sort of like drilled into me from day one. Like I knew as a summer associate, so I got hired by my job after basically doing like an apprenticeship for a summer, okay? So during that summer, it was like 3 months worth of a job interview. And during that time, I was being judged on various metrics. And one of those things was my attention to detail, and essentially my perfectionism, like how perfect my documents were that I was putting out and my writing. So this was like things that were really, really small details, right? Like, did you have one extra space next to a period? Or did you forget, to put this in italics in a citation? So there were it was really, really down to the nitty gritty. And, that was something that was very valued, right? So I knew that by being perfect, I could not only land myself a job, but that I could prove myself worthy to my superiors, to partners, to colleagues, and to clients, right? So being a perfectionist as a lawyer is something that is actually valued. And also something that if you don't do can have consequences, right? So I've seen people be yelled at for not being perfect as a lawyer. I've seen, pleadings. So pleading is like a document that you submit to the court. I've seen things be rejected because there are mistakes. Basically sloppiness is just not something, or maybe you don't get a job, right? Because you weren't, your work was sloppy. So basically, perfectionism is encouraged and sloppiness is punished. So this is, in my job as a lawyer, but let's be honest, this is kind of the way it is in Western culture in general, especially in corporate culture, okay? We tend to value perfectionism and we tend to punish or shy away from sloppiness, okay? So the problem was that because I developed this perfectionist routine and mentality, I was actually having problems at work. So maybe you can identify with some of these problems. So first of all, one major problem that I was having was that I was unable to delegate my work to other people because I couldn't trust anyone else to do it as good as I could do it. Okay. So when you're a perfectionist, it also means that sometimes you develop a need to control, right? Because you can't ensure that something is perfect if you don't have control over it. So let me know if that's something that I see there's a couple of people watching. So first of all, if you're watching, go ahead and say hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from. But let me know if that's something that comes up for you as a result of your perfectionism. And it can also be in your personal life, right? So sometimes in our personal lives, let's say that you're really a perfectionist when it comes to cleaning your house and it has to be an exact specific way. It's going to be hard for you to delegate that task to a housekeeper, for example, even though that might save you a ton of time and be way more efficient for what you need in your life. Okay, so number one, it's hard to delegate to people when you're a perfectionist. Number two, it's very hard to manage other people. So as a lawyer, once you start climbing the ranks, you are supposed to delegate certain things to people who are underneath you, and then you need to manage those people. But when those people don't meet your perfect expectations, which may or may not even be reasonable, right? Like a lot of times these expectations are totally unreasonable. It creates a conflict because then you have to manage that person. And a lot of times that can be really aggravating and frustrating if you're constantly trying to make something perfect and that person on the other end who you're managing isn't able to meet your expectations. So delegation, management can become major issues with perfectionism. Another huge problem is that you're not going to get things done because you're going to be so obsessed with making sure that everything is exactly the way that it needs to be, that everything is perfect, that you're actually not going to get things done. So that can translate into, I have a client right now who's also an attorney, and she is missing deadlines, okay? Because she feels like her work has to be so perfect that she's spending hours and hours and hours on it. And at the end of the day, she's not able to get certain things done, okay? So that's a huge problem if you're not getting things done or if you're missing deadlines because you're spending so much time trying to attain an unattainable standard that you're not able to actually finish work, okay? And then also your to-do list is piling up on the side there because you're spending so many hours doing this one task that you're trying to get to be perfect that you're leaving all of these other activities on the table. So that's a problem, okay? Sometimes it can make you even afraid to start things. Like if you are so worried about being perfect and you feel a little bit out of your comfort zone when you're starting something and you're not sure that you can do a perfect job, it's going to create that sense of fear and you're not even going to want to pursue it at all. So it can prevent you from taking risks, from taking a leap. I'll explain a little bit about how that works also in terms of indecision. So I have a client right now who really wants a career change. She wants to make a career transition, but she's not exactly sure what career she wants to transition to. And she has a list of 10 to 15 different ideas that she's kind of excited about, and none of them are perfect, okay? So she's going around and around in circles, researching this and doing more research on that and trying out this thing, but then not fully committing to it and then doing that. So she's really in this place of indecision and not able to commit to something because nothing is perfect, right? So until she feels like something is absolutely 100% perfect, she can't move forward, okay? So this can create indecision, it can create lack of commitment, and it's just, it makes you afraid to take leaps and risks in life, okay? So that's another example of that. So let me know in the comments if any of those relate to you. Oh, Marnie, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see you. That's awesome. Yay, I am so excited that you're here right now. So let me know if you feel like any of those things or something else, for example, that I haven't mentioned relates to you. And if you hear any background noise, it's my Labradoodle. She's hanging out here with me right now. Okay, so perfectionism, we've learned in some ways can be a good thing because it makes you appear to be really great at your work. It sets you apart from the pack. It helps you get jobs. It helps you keep jobs. It helps impress people, all of that stuff. And I'm not going to say that that's not important. And if you're here, that's probably a big part of why you're a perfectionist, right? You're an ambitious career woman. The problem is that that comes with all of those problems, with all of that baggage. So how can we keep the good and let go of the bad? So I want to give you guys 5 different tips right now for how to deal with and heal from perfectionism. Okay, so the first thing that you need to figure out is, where is your perfectionism coming from? So you want to identify, why am I being a perfectionist? And is this authentically me, right? So, I'll give you an example of this. We'll go back to each of these in turn. I'm going to list the 5 different tips and then we'll go back to each of them in more depth. So the first one is identifying where it comes from and understanding, is this authentically me? The second tip is you need to evaluate what this is doing to your life and to your results specifically. The third is I want you to be on the spectrum, okay? And I'll explain what that means in a little bit. It's not the autism spectrum. It's a different kind of spectrum, okay? And I'll explain what that means. The fourth tip is that you want to create helpful, positive mantras for yourself. And then the fifth tip is to create optimizations, okay? Which is similar in some ways, if there are any therapists here, it's similar to exposure therapy. Okay, so let's start with the first tip. So identifying where your perfectionism is coming from and understanding whether this is authentically you. So we pick up a lot of mindsets during our life, right? Like sometimes we might have imposter syndrome, we might have low self-esteem, we might have a people-pleasing attitude, and then of course there's perfectionism. And a lot of these types of mentalities or mindsets are things that we have picked up over the course of our lives. So they're not necessarily essential to who we are. They're not a part of our core personality. They're things that we've picked up over time from parents, family, society. It could be a job, like I mentioned in the beginning, how I knew that my job valued my perfectionism. And so that, and also didn't hire people who, had mistakes or whatever. So that experience at my job, like trained me how to become a bit of a perfectionist, right? So that's an example. Another example of this, I would say like with parents, this comes up a lot of the time where you feel like to get your parents' attention, you need to be like an A++, or they require you to be perfect in order to be somebody who they will pay attention to, who they will love, right? That comes up all the time. I have a client who, her perfectionism, a great deal of it is coming from her financial history, right? So she grew up not in like complete poverty, but where money was a struggle. And now she has this like high-powered, amazing job where she's like doing really well. But it's a job that, quality of work is kind of what sets her apart from people. And so she has really developed this need to control and this mentality, this perfectionist mentality, where she feels like if she can't be perfect, she might she might lose that financial status that she's gained and that security. Okay. So think about what in your life, whether it's from childhood, from your family, or even just from society standards, right? Like there are also so many standards out there that we see in magazines and newspapers, pictures, social media of women who are needing to be perfect, right? They have to have the perfect hair. They have to have the perfect body. You need to just look like your life is so perfect and buttoned up all the time, right? Everyone on social media just looks like they're so perfect and everything. Everyone's airbrushed, and that's just not reality, okay? So that's something that has been conferred upon us from external sources, the media, society. So I want you to really like look at your own perfectionism and see where that's showing up in your life. And then I want you to ask yourself, where is this coming from? Is this something from my childhood? Is this something about an experience that I had or a trauma that I had? Or is this just something about like society and things that I have basically been exposed to my entire life? And maybe some of it is even unconscious to some degree. All right, so that's the first step that you want to take. The second step, again, is to evaluate what this is doing to your life and also to your results, okay? So, again, just going back to some of the negative things the consequences to perfectionism that we talked about that are typical for people. Like, so one is that you're not getting shit done. You are procrastinating, you're just unable to complete tasks, your to-do list is just getting super, super long. I'll give my husband a little shout out here. He sometimes just like takes so long with tasks. He's a surgeon. And so, for a surgeon, we want our surgeons to be perfectionists, right? Like we definitely want them to be perfect when they do our surgery, right? But sometimes that perfectionism also translates into spending copious amounts of time on sending an email or a follow-up that could easily take a lot less time and then would allow him the bandwidth to do other things that are super time sensitive and urgent, okay? it can cause a lot of anxiety to be a perfectionist, because if you can't be perfect, which often is totally not realistic and unattainable, then so if you can't be perfect, then you're going to just feel anxious about that. And you might also feel depressed about that too. It might impact your self-esteem, because if you're not perfect, then you're not worthy, then you're not lovable, then you're not good enough. Again, I gave you guys an example before about how it can prevent you from making decisions in your life. Like if you can't find the perfect fit for something, then no fit is going to be good enough and you're unable to move forward at all. You will be a judge. You will judge yourself and others very harshly if you're a perfectionist. Again, because anytime that you're not perfect, which is going to be a lot of the time, you are going to have that negative voice in your head telling you that it's not okay. Again, that can impact your self-esteem, your self-worth. It can cause depression, anxiety, and also it's going to be a problem when you try to manage or delegate to other people, because they're not going to be meeting your standards and you're constantly going to be judging them as well. And ultimately, when you do that, other people won't want to work with you. They're not going to enjoy working with you. They're not going to like working with you. It's going to be very difficult for you to find people to delegate to and to manage a great team effectively. Okay? So that's the bad. And I want you to look objectively at what's going on in your life and at what your perfectionism is doing. And I want you to identify if any of those things are happening for you. Okay. Now, I also really want you to look at the good, right? Because we wouldn't be perfectionists if it was like all bad. The reason behind the perfectionism, there's good intentions behind that little voice inside of your head that's telling you have to be an A++ all of the time. Okay. So number one, being a perfectionist for many people has helped them to advance their career. I told you in the beginning, I am pretty sure that part of me getting the job that I got, and it was even listed in one of my reviews that I was meticulous, right? Was because my work was so excellent due to being a perfectionist. Okay. So there are people who genuinely believe that in order to advance your career, you must have perfect work. And sometimes that also motivates you, right? Like it's driving you to have a really great work product. So the quality of your work when you're a perfectionist will tend to be high. Now, the volume of your work might be low because you're not able to complete everything. But if you're a perfectionist, chances are that most of what you're putting out is fairly good quality, okay? Also, people can count on you when you're a perfectionist. Like I maintain some level of, and I'll talk about the spectrum in a minute. My perfectionism is not totally something that I want to get rid of. Like one of the reasons that my clients love working with me is that I am very, I don't want to use the word meticulous anymore, because like I do allow there to be little mistakes that are meaningless in my work, but there aren't meaningful mistakes in my work. Like I am very careful with clients to be extremely professional and to ensure that I always send them follow-ups on time, that I'm always checking in on time with them, that I really listen to exactly what they're saying, that I write things down, that I make sure that like when I say I'm going to deliver something, that I deliver it. Okay. So, people, when you're a perfectionist, people learn that they can count on you, that you're not going to make mistakes. Okay. So that can sometimes be a good thing. All right. So what I want you to do in terms of evaluating what perfectionism is doing to your life and your results is I want you to, first of all, focus on the results that you want, right? So what is it that I want out of my life and career? I would like to have more free time in my personal life. I would like to get a promotion. I would like to have a job that I feel is like really balanced. I would like to feel like really fulfilled in my life. Whatever your goals are, the results that you want to achieve in your life, I want you to think about those things. And then I want you to think about them vis-a-vis your perfectionism. What is your perfectionism doing to your ability to achieve those results? And I want you to include both the good and the bad, because some of it we want to keep, okay? So let's talk about how to do that. So I want to explain to you guys something called the excellence principle, which is about being on the spectrum. How do we keep quality of work, that A+ level of work, without all of the insanity and stress and problems that come with being a crazy control freak perfectionist. Okay, so I want you guys to imagine that there's a spectrum, right? There's a line going from here to here. On this side of the spectrum, we have complete sloppiness, okay? And on this side of the spectrum, we have perfectionism or perfect. So sloppy, perfect, okay? The problem is most of us are very black and white thinkers. So we tend to think of either I am super sloppy or I have to be perfect, okay? So a lot of perfectionists have this issue where they're very black and white thinkers. There isn't anything on that spectrum in between. But there is a lot on that spectrum in between. You are not either like super sloppy or a completely perfect angel, okay? There's so much in between. Now, you need to decide for yourself where you need to fall on that spectrum, not only in general, but in specific situations, okay? So what I would argue is, and this is where the term the excellence principle comes in, none of us should ever strive to be here on the perfect, okay? If this is 100%, especially for you ambitious career women where your 100% is probably someone else's 150% and your 70% is likely a normal person's 100%. Think about that for a moment if that might be you, if you're a high achiever, okay? Don't be here, okay? Don't be 100%, be here. Be excellent. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be excellent. So think about whether that is 70%, 80%, 90%, it's not 0%, okay? I don't want you to be sloppy. I don't want you to be like 30%, like really, really like shitty work. I want you to be in that upper 30%, right? Whether it's 70, 80, 90, 95, whatever. Maybe there's some really special occasion where you want to be 95% perfect. But here's how you need to be thinking about that in terms of evaluating those, where you need to be on the spectrum. So some things, like for example, if you're a lawyer, and I keep going back to the lawyer example because that's my background, but this plays into like tons of other, situations. So one of my clients, again, she's a lawyer, and she has billable hours, right? So she bills clients by the hour, which means that like whatever time she spends doing something, somebody else has to pay for, or her firm has to write that off, which is basically a loss for them. So time is money in that situation. And in fact, in all of our lives, whether or not you're billing hours, time is money. Like that is your time that you could be spent making other money, that you could be spent spending time with your family, being healthy, whatever it is. Okay. So in a situation where the task that is required of you is something where perhaps the client does not really care if it is an A+. They just need something that's done, right? Like they just need something that's like available to them quickly, that's gonna get the job done, okay? It doesn't need to be like the America's greatest novel that was ever written, okay? So we're not looking for To Kill a Mockingbird here. We're looking for 50 Shades of Grey. Okay, that's a bad example, but you get what I mean, okay? So maybe in that case, like, you need to set some time limits for yourself and understand that you're only going to do one proofread instead of your normal 4 proofreads, okay? So that's one type of situation. Maybe there's another situation where, for example, you have a really important presentation that's like make or break the company, and that's something that you really do want to spend that additional time on, and you want to be more closer to that perfect level, but again, still in the excellent range, okay? So making sure that you understand, first of all, that there is a spectrum, that it's not black and white. Just that shift in your mentality alone is going to really, really make an impact for you. And then thinking in each specific circumstance when you're working on a task, where do I really need to be in terms of whether or not this needs to be perfect, okay? So like how important is it that I need to spend copious amounts of time making this perfect, and think about the opportunity cost too, right? Like if I spend 10 hours working on this project, that means that other project doesn't get done. Okay, so you need to find that sweet spot in each situation. All right, so that's the spectrum. That's the excellence principle. The fourth tip I wanted to give you guys is creating mantras. So we've talked a lot about like mindset and sort of like where some of the perfectionism comes from. And it's really, a lot of it is just like automatic stuff for us now. Like we're not even conscious of the fact that we're doing it, right? It's just things that we've picked up over the years, a story that we've been telling ourselves forever and ever and ever. And that story that we tell ourselves impacts the way that we feel about ourselves, about the world, about what we need to do. And therefore it impacts what we do or don't do, right? I mean, it can create a lot of procrastination, and ultimately it impacts the results that we're getting. So when you change that story that you're telling yourself, you can also change your emotions and you can change the results that you're getting in life. Okay. So you can decide that you want to have less anxiety, more confidence. You want to take more action. You want to be more effective and more productive. And those are the benefits that you're going to get when you actually change your story, when you change your mindset. So I'm going to give you guys a few examples of mantras that I personally really love that have really helped me. This is not an exhaustive list, so if you have something else that you like better, that's great too. But done is better than perfect. So that is something, I actually have a post-it on the wall in front of me that says that mantra. Okay, so when you create these mantras, I want you to also think about like where you're going to put them so that you see them, whether it's like post-it notes or maybe, you know, like an affirmation that you just read every morning, something like that. Okay. Done is better than perfect. And in a lot of situations, especially maybe not if you're like a lawyer. Okay. I do understand that there's like an additional part of your job description is to like make sure there are no mistakes in a contract, right? But in most other business situations, done is better than perfect, okay? And so is excellence. Excellence is better than perfect, right? Because there are costs to being perfect. So that's another way you could state that affirmation. Excellent is good enough, okay? Perfect isn't real. Perfect isn't effective. In many cases, being perfect is not effective, okay? I can make a mistake and it will still be okay. Or I can make a mistake and I will still be loved. I will still be valued. I'm not going to lose my job if I make one mistake, right? People make mistakes all of the time. It's okay. All right. It's okay to make a mistake. My client who I was telling you guys about, who is really indecisive about choosing a different job opportunity, I think one of her affirmations was actually, you know, nothing is ever going to be perfect on paper and I won't know unless I try. Okay. So that is the next tip that I want to give you guys, which is to find whatever resonates with you, to create a mantra that makes sense for you, and to figure out how to ensure that you're repeating or seeing that mantra in your daily life. Okay. Then finally, we have our fifth tip, which is a fun one. This is where you're actually going to make mistakes, okay? I call it optimizations. Basically, let's imagine that you have a habit, right? So your habit is that you're a perfectionist, and every time you do this, you're like getting the same result, okay? So like, let's say that the result that you want is here, the result that you're getting is here, here's you being a perfectionist, and instead of going here, you keep going down to this place. Okay. So what we want to do, if you can imagine that you're like a little car, you know, we want to just like change your GPS so that we can like recalibrate it so that it goes here instead of going down. Okay. So part of that again is shifting your mindset. But sometimes we can also like jog that just by changing the action. And when you change that action, it's actually going to, first of all, demonstrate the result that you're going to get. And then if you do that enough times with consistency, that's going to create new pathways in your brain. It's going to create a new feedback loop so that you're really able to see that perfectionism does not benefit your life, and that being excellent instead of perfect is the way to go. And then you're going to develop that habit over time. So what do I mean by an optimization, right? So that's the course correction that I was talking about. And what I want you to do is I want you to change your actions. So instead of changing your thoughts and your story, now we're talking about actions. Change your actions in order to change your results. And again, this is going to give your brain the feedback that it needs and the evidence that it needs to understand that being perfect isn't actually necessary to achieve what you want to achieve. Okay. So I'll give you guys kind of like an odd example. So one of my like talents and hobbies on the side is that I love singing. Okay. But I'm not a professional singer because I'm also really shy, and my perfectionism has made it very, very difficult for me to sing in public or to audition for singing groups because I feel like I'm not going to be perfect. And therefore, if I can't be like 100% perfect, then I don't want to do it at all, right? Sounds familiar story, okay? So a couple of years ago, I identified this a cappella group that I really wanted to join. I was scared about auditioning for it, but I was like, you know what? I just got to let go of my perfectionism. Like, I don't know that the audition is going to go perfectly. I'll never be able to fully know that, but I've practiced a few times and hopefully it will be enough, right? And so I went to the audition. It wasn't perfect, right? Like there were, one or two notes where like, I was like, ooh, I wish I could have gone back and done that a little differently. Okay. And at the end of the day, I was accepted into the group, right? So that was evidence to me that like, I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to be excellent. And I was excellent. I was good enough. And if I hadn't taken that risk, then I never would have gotten that reward. I never would have gotten that result. Okay. So what I'm encouraging you to do is put a typo in it, okay? I want you to intentionally make a mistake, all right? So whether that is for you, like, I need to intentionally put a typo in one of my emails and see what happens, or I need to not respond to these emails until tomorrow morning, or I need to, not respond to this text message, or I'm not going to give my kids a bath tonight because I'm really tired and I just don't have time. I want you to think about something that you're doing in your life where you're being a perfectionist and it's causing you a lot of problems. And then I want you to think about one little action you can take to intentionally make a mistake. And I want you to see what happens as a result of that. Okay. I'm not telling you that you should like go to the way other side of the spectrum and do something that's like totally ridiculous and sloppy and irresponsible. I'm just telling you to put a typo in it, make a little tiny chip in the china, in the plate, and have it not be 100% perfect. Okay. So do it on purpose, make that little mistake, let your brain start to create that new feedback loop. All right, so just to recap the 5 different tips that we covered today. So tip number 1 was to identify where your perfectionism is coming from and to really understand whether this is authentically something that is a core part of who you are, or where you might have picked some of this up from, right? The second thing is to evaluate what it's really doing to your life, the good and the bad. The third thing is to be on the spectrum, right? So to understand that it's not black and white and that it's okay, and actually not just okay, but way better if you can be excellent instead of perfect, okay? The fourth tip is to create mantras so that you can retell your story and shift your mindset into one where excellence is the goal and being and accomplishing things is the goal instead of needing to be perfect all of the time. And then finally, you want to create optimizations for yourself. So that's where you intentionally make little mistakes that still allow you to do excellent work, but that also show you that you can better achieve the results that you want, or still achieve the results that you want. And nothing bad's going to happen if you have one little typo, right? And that's going to help generate this new feedback loop for you in your brain where you're going to understand that your pattern can shift and that you can actually be more effective, have less anxiety, still create amazing work product, be more productive, and have more confidence in your work and in your life. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed this masterclass. Again, please let me know if you were watching this. Drop a hashtag replay and let me know where you're tuning in from. Let me know what parts of this identify for you, and let me know if there were any questions. Okay, I'm happy to respond to questions in the comments. And then just to let you guys know, if you really feel like this was valuable, if you feel like your perfectionism is something that's truly been holding you back, and that maybe you have other mindsets that I mentioned that are also holding you back, right? That you're just not able to overcome this and succeed in your soul-aligned career, that anxiety, that stress is really kind of like overpowering you. The overwhelm is too much, that the perfectionism is causing burnout. I just want you to know that you're not alone. Okay, many of my clients experience that, and I want you to know that it's something that you can fix, okay? It's something that we can fix together. You can learn how to make bold, confident, and soul-aligned decisions in your life. You can learn how to get shit done and make moves and do it effectively with a huge amount of productivity. And you can see the results that you want to have in your life, okay? So if you are ready to make that transition, ready to make that change, I invite you to book a free clarity call with me, and we can talk a little bit about how my coaching programs help to get you there in less than 90 days, okay? I've seen people make huge leaps, huge shifts, huge momentous transitions in their life in a very short period of time. It's something that, as a recovering perfectionist, who has worked with many clients who are also now recovering perfectionists, it's something that I'm passionate about and that I'd love to share with you more about how that works and what the tools are that we teach in the program. So please don't hesitate to book your free clarity call. There's a link to do that in the intro section here, and I'll put it in the comments as well. And if you have any questions, again, please feel free to type those in the chat or to DM me. And I really enjoyed chatting with you guys. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you later.